Welcome to the Crazy Chicken People podcast. If you're crazy about chickens, then you're in the right place. Hey, what's up, everybody? Thank you for joining me today. I hope that you and your chickens are staying cool in this very hot summer weather we're having right now. Before getting into today's topic, there was a couple of quick things I wanted to mention. One was that I did build that ice chest drinking fountain thing that I was talking about. I mentioned it a couple episodes back, the one about keeping chickens cool. I say built it. I drilled a hole in an ice chest and ran a hose through it. But it actually worked out really well. Tested it last night, used it today for the first time, put a few gallons of ice in there, and it dripped through and created the little pan underneath that I was looking for. I could tell that the free-ranging flock, there was a lot of foot traffic through there, so they liked it. I still need to come up with a more permanent stand. It's just bungee corded to a milk crate right now, but worked out really good. I was going to post some pictures of it to our farm's Facebook page and put a link for that in the notes in case you guys wanted to see it. And then the other thing was that I noticed that we have actually several international listeners. In fact, I noticed that there's a few people in London. I joined a couple of UK chicken keeping Facebook groups just to try to get a feel for, I don't know, what might be different over there. In fact, if any international listeners, it would be awesome to hear from you. If you guys want to shoot me an email or through Facebook or, shoot me a text. I think my phone number is posted with the show info. Okay, getting into the show. Something that I've noticed quite a bit of lately, in fact, especially just over the last few days, a lot of people in different chicken groups posting pictures of their first eggs. And I think for a lot of people, it is, in fact, first egg ever, having just gotten into chickens, which is always very exciting. I mean, whether it's your first time with chickens or you've had them for a long time, I think whenever a new group of birds that you have starts laying, it's kind of exciting. But with that, I've also seen a lot of posts about, how to keep chicken eggs and what's the best way to do that. I mean, there's only so many ways to do it, but even with those couple of options, I have seen it be fiercely debated. I think like so many things that we talk about, it's going to come down to what works best for you and what you feel good about. But I did want to go over a couple of the options and some more of the information that comes along with that. I did a little bit of research, tried to find what I felt like was factual information, not just opinion, which I think if you go online and you ask, you're going to get a lot of opinions and probably a lot of ideas that will work. But it can get a little bit difficult to sift through all that. So I'll, of course, mention some of the things that I do. But for the most part, everything I was going to go through is information that I found to be, as best I can tell, just accurate and factual. And then something for you to think about and make a decision on your own. So starting off right at the beginning with some tips on collecting your eggs. So right off the bat, you want to make sure that your nesting box is kept pretty clean at all times. Cleaner nesting box is going to, of course, mean cleaner eggs, which is good. But beyond that also helps with smell, keeping pests and mites and things like that under control a little bit better. You just want that area to be generally clean. Something I just started trying in one of my coops, in fact, I had seen it mentioned a few times, is using artificial grass, and then I use like a little pad layer underneath it, just to add a little bit of cushion. I know that stuff can get hot, but that doesn't seem to be a problem when it's in the shade. But it's very easy to clean. You can pull it out, hose it off for a minute, it dries fast, and throw it right back in. I think I'm going to end up going with that in probably all my nesting boxes. Now, when collecting the eggs themselves, as far as how often, I'm only able to do it in the late afternoon or in the evening, once we're all home from work and school. But I think ideally, if you can do it twice a day, once in the morning, and then once again later in the afternoon or evening. And if you can't do it twice, mid-morning seems to be a good time. They'll usually have laid their eggs by then. But the reason for wanting to collect it more often or early is just so that the eggs spend less time in the nesting box. Less time in there is just less chance that they're going to crack, get knocked around a little bit, hit up against other eggs. I know a lot of chickens will pile onto the same nesting box in one coop. So just getting them out of there as soon as you can is going to help reduce in the number of cracked eggs you end up with. You want to use a pretty clean, a bucket or a basket or whatever it is you use to collect eggs. Hopefully it's kind of padded and just very clean. So much about keeping and storing your eggs is about cleanliness, as we'll get into, because that's a whole topic in itself. But keeping your nesting box and your collecting trays clean is just going to make sure that they stay a little bit cleaner the whole way through. So once the collecting is done and you go to put them away, you want to make sure you're doing that in such a way that you're keeping egg freshness in mind. So a way of sorting them by date. And I've found that using egg cartons actually just works really good for me. And I just fill up cartons through the week. And then once that week is done, I mark all those egg cartons with the date from the beginning of that week. So I'm being a little bit conservative with the freshness on them. And then however many eggs that might be for the week, I can put them aside and I know when they were laid and then when they're going to be good until. Marking eggs is certainly an option. A pencil, a wax crayon, those things are definitely safe. I've heard people use permanent marker. To me, that seems like it could bleed through, but they say it's okay. But definitely a pencil or a crayon. I actually only do that for hatching eggs. Those being a little bit more sensitive to freshness, you really need to know exactly how old those are. But for eggs that I'm eating, I don't mind just sorting those by each week's collection. And maybe you just have a few hens that are laying and you're not getting a ton of eggs where, keeping track of what week they were laid is so important. There's a bunch of cool little gadgets that you can keep in the kitchen that can kind of help you keep track of which eggs are freshest. I know that there's those kind of spiraling egg dispensers. You just keep putting new ones on top and your older ones roll out the bottom. There's those shelves that have the kind of indents in them so you can stack your eggs in there. You do want to make sure you're stacking your eggs or keeping your eggs with the pointy end down. That helps keep the air bubble and the yolk where it should be. But most importantly, you just don't want to be in a spot where you're trying to remember how long ago you set down a bucket of eggs that you find, in the barn or in your backyard. I've certainly been there, found eggs in my pocket. I've found eggs in the laundry, as I'm sure many of you have. Sometimes you find it in your pocket when you sit down or bump into something and it breaks in there and you feel it and you're like, oh, yep, that was an egg. But just keeping track of them. I hate being in the kitchen and just seeing some random eggs on the counter and no idea how old those are. Usually if they're on the counter, they're going to be good. They're not going to sit around my house for that long, but I do just want to have a pretty good idea that the eggs that we're eating are fresh. Now getting into storage of your eggs, and what is usually the big question that I think you'll see a lot of people answer either way is whether or not to wash your eggs. At our house, we generally do not wash our eggs. Sometimes in the winter, you'll notice the birds will track a little bit of mud into the coop and into the nesting boxes. So you can end up with some dirty ones there, or one that just, for whatever reason, gets, maybe just too much poop on it. If I feel it does need to be washed, we'll usually just wash it and then use it that day, at that time, whether it's making up some eggs to eat or just crack and give to the dog or scramble up a few and give back to the chickens. But generally keep them unwashed. You can do a light wipe down, but the reason for not washing them is that you want that bloom to stay on them. And if you're not sure about what that is, the bloom is a natural protective layer. It's actually 2 layers. It's like a sealer that is applied to the egg before it passes all the way through. It's made up mostly of proteins and a few other compounds, and it just naturally seals the thousands of pores that are in that eggshell. So when you wash an egg, you do wash off all the bloom, and that's the reason for needing to refrigerate it right away. And some people will say that, if you do remove the bloom, and even when you do keep it in the refrigerator, because of all those pores, the eggs are now exposed to at least the possibility of some contaminants getting through those pores and into the egg, which you wouldn't want. Of course, we've all eaten plenty of washed eggs from grocery stores and restaurants, and, they're fine. And if that's how you choose to keep your eggs, I think there's nothing wrong with it. When you do collect them, you'll want to wash them and then get them refrigerated immediately. And at that point, they should be good in your refrigerator for about 2 months. But it is important you want to get them refrigerated definitely right after they are washed. Now, unwashed eggs, you can keep those refrigerated also, and those should stay good for up to 3 months. You can also keep them at room temperature. And again, if you're only collecting enough eggs that you and your family are pretty much using them all week to week, keeping them out on the countertop at room temperature. I say room temperature, cooler is always better, in the 70 to 75 degree range. Much warmer than that, and you may want to consider not keeping them as long. And then you can still move them into the fridge from the countertop, say within a week or two of getting them. If you just haven't used them yet, they'll stay good in the fridge for another few weeks. And then if you're interested in storing your eggs for longer than that, maybe because you know that your chickens aren't going to be producing as much, or maybe you want to stock up for the wintertime when your chickens aren't laying as much, or you just like to have that extra storage on hand. There is a few other methods, most of which I have not tried, but you can freeze your eggs. You don't want to freeze them in the shell. They'll break. One way of doing it that I've seen is, and you need to actually mix the yolks and the whites first, basically scramble them up or separate the yolks. I'm not sure for the reason on that. Maybe just the yolk itself doesn't do well when it freezes if it stays whole. But you want to mix them up and then putting them in ice cube trays and then popping those into some plastic bags. And I've read that properly stored eggs in the freezer can be good for up to a year. So that could definitely get you through the winter if that's your goal. Another method is water glassing. Now, this is something that has been around since the 1800s. And this was a very common way for people to be able to keep eggs for a long time and have food storage before refrigeration. Now, I think since we have gotten refrigerators and better ways to store food, it's fallen out of favor. But I have seen that in a lot of homesteading circles, it is kind of gaining popularity again. And from what I read and have seen on this, you're basically putting your eggs in a glass jar, filling them with water and hydrated lime. And I'm sure the proportions have to be correct. I don't recall exactly what that is. But with that method, you can store those eggs for, I read, a year to 18 months. Some people even saying up to 2 years. So if you really want to store some eggs for a long time, that is an option. I'm not sure it's one that I'll ever be reporting back on that I tried. I don't think I will. Dehydrating eggs is another long-term storage option. And this kind of seems crazy to me, but from what I read, if properly stored in an oxygen-free environment and kept cool, dehydrated eggs can last 5 to 10 years. I hope I'm never in a position where I have to eat a 10-year-old dehydrated egg. If I was, I'd probably be pretty happy for it at that moment. But if you're just taking in eggs hand over fist and you really want to save them, or maybe have a food dehydrator, you just want to try it for the heck of it, that's a way that you could store a lot of eggs in a very small amount of space. And one last one I have for slightly long-term storage is pickled eggs. I actually just tried these for the first time in my life. I guess it was about a year ago now. I didn't know pickled eggs were something that people really ate. I think I had seen them maybe on TV in a bar, like a big disgusting looking jar of eggs, and thought that can't be real. But somebody brought some into work one time. They were seasoned with garlic and jalapeno, and I thought, yeah, whatever, I'll try it. And it was actually really good. I ended up making some pickled quail eggs at one point. Those were really good, but it wasn't something I decided to spend a lot of time doing. I only tried it a couple of times, but I did like them. They are good. So, of course, you're just hard boiling the egg and then running them through the pickling process. And then you can keep those for 3 to 4 months. So if that's a flavor you enjoy, might be another good option for you as you're starting to get in all these eggs now. So that's what I got for you this week. Hopefully you got some ideas that will help keeping your eggs at home clean and organized a little bit easier. If you did enjoy the show and you haven't already subscribed, it would be great if you did. It really helps get the show out there. Talk to you next time.